Hello, everyone, and welcome to our new season of Heart of the Matter. I am your host, Elizabeth Vargas, and it's wonderful to be back. And boy, a lot of news out. A few weeks ago, there was an alarming new study from the CDC about teenagers and their mental health, particularly that of girls. According to the CDC, 3 out of 5 teenage girls feel persistent sadness, and that is double the rate of teenage boys. Now, these are some of the highest rates of sadness reported among our teens and our young adults in a decade. According to experts, and this is really interesting, depression in boys and girls looks very different often. Boys show it often with irritability or aggression, while girls show sadness and depression with feelings of hopelessness. The numbers are even worse for teenagers who identify as gay or bisexual. 57% of girls report feeling persistently sad, but it's 69% of teenagers who identify as gay or bisexual. Well, none of this is a surprise to our guest today. Singer and songwriter Mary Lambert survived severe childhood trauma. By the time she was 17, she was medicating herself with alcohol, using it to numb her feelings, and she attempted suicide. She now says that what helped save her was her music, that music for her was like survival, a form of therapy. The world really learned of Mary's gorgeous voice in the blockbuster hit Same Love, which she sings with Macklemore, another music star in recovery. They say in life the greatest predictor of success is grit. Well, Mary has it. Her perseverance and courage and her amazing gift of music have made her something of an icon to music fans and young women everywhere. So I'm very pleased to welcome Mary Lambert to Heart of the Matter. Mary Lambert, welcome to Heart of the Matter.
Hi. Wow, you have such a wonderful voice.
Well, coming from you, I'm very, very flattered because you are the woman with the dulcet tones, as they say. I should say at the outset, I'm a huge fan. Same Love is one of my favorite songs, and your vocals on it are just gorgeous.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
You know, we'll get into your story in a second, but can you just tell me how that came about? Because it was in many ways a big break for you.
Yeah.
Macklemore calling you up and saying, "Hey, I want you to sing with me on this song." How did that happen?
Totally. It's like a freak accident. Like it shouldn't have happened. But I had started I was a songwriter since I was like 13, but I had started performing spoken word poetry. And I had just been, I just left the evangelical church and I was really struggling with my relationship with the church and my relationship with God and my queerness. And I tried to write songs about it and it never felt true to me. It had felt a little contrived as I was trying to write them. So when I found spoken word, it was a way for me to really express anger and frustration with this community that's all about love and Jesus's compassion, and how alienated I felt and how antithetical to Christianity homophobia is. So I had explored that a lot in my poetry, and I had a friend that was very supportive of my work and knew that I was also a songwriter and a singer. And I had performed a bit around town. I still didn't have any formal releases out. There was no way you could like really find my music. I think there was like a YouTube video of me singing somewhere. And a friend of a friend who knew Macklemore and Ryan knew they were working on this song about gay rights and the context of church, the element of church in the song. And she was like, "Oh, Mary is the perfect person to deliver this." And so she called me up and said, do you want to do a song with Macklemore? I was like, yeah, yeah, I think that sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, I think I'm not busy. I think I can make that day work any day for the next 2 years.
Totally. So I had about, she's like, can you come in tonight? And here's the song. They're on a really tight deadline. Can you try to come up with something today? So I had about 2 or 3 hours with the song, and I came up with about 4 different choruses. And I showed up to the studio. I met them the first time. I sang to them what I'd written, and that's what we tracked that night. And that's the song that you hear. So it happened very quickly.
You wrote the part that you sing?
I did, yes.
Okay. Actually, I should have asked if I could do this. Is there any way you could just sing part of that for me?
Sure.
Okay.
I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. She keeps me warm.
Oh my God. That's so pretty.
Thank you.
How did you come up with those words? Because they sound, gosh, authentic doesn't even begin to describe that. You're writing and singing from a place of deep personal experience. You were a kid who really struggled growing up with all sorts of mental health issues. A kid who self-medicated with alcohol, a kid who felt different from the first time you can remember.
Mm-hmm.
And a kid who was struggling with a church in which you grew up that didn't accept you as a gay woman.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think when I write, melody comes really naturally to me. So vocalizing is just, I'm constantly singing. I've always been that way. It used to be the most annoying thing to my sister. And it just really hasn't ended. I just sing all the time. So melody is never really an issue for me when I'm writing music, but I like to be really intentional with lyric writing and with what I want to communicate to the world. So if I'm writing something for myself, I don't care as much about the reception of it or what people will take away from it. It is like, it's just my own sense of healing and what I need to say out loud in that moment. And then through the process of like editing and finessing something, I will try to be a little bit more intentional and think about impact and think if, okay, what would it be like for a 7-year-old to hear this? What would it be like for somebody who's dealing with X, Y, and Z? What about a non-believer? What about somebody who's super homophobic? Like, how do I reach all of these people and create universal themes while still being authentic to myself and create something beautiful, something that's also personal. Mm-hmm. And when they sent me that song, I realized there was already so much, direction of like a pragmatic, logical, hey, like this isn't okay. But I realized there was an element of humanness to humanize, I guess, like queer people, because in the church, we're just really seen as like, dirty sinners that are just indulging our sins, Mm-hmm. And so if I can bring it back to love, if I can say, this is what it feels like to love and to be loved. And that person that keeps you warm at night is a really universal thing. And if I can, ninja my way in to a conservative Christian's heart, then maybe I have a chance of having them see my humanity.
Were you nervous at all about, Macklemore is huge, and this song was huge, a monster hit.
Yeah.
And as you yourself put it in one interview, you were basically getting up on a massive, enormous world stage and telling the entire world you're gay.
Yeah. Yeah, it was terrifying. But I wasn't really scared of like the career aspect of it or the performance aspect of it, really, because I mean, from a young age, I have always felt a little delusional. I don't know if delusional is the right word, but I had this like, I know I'm supposed to be doing something like this. This feels like it felt very natural, like a natural set of events to happen. Like I was the person that, when I was 19, I told my boss that I might need Sundays off for award shows. Like I was ready for this, and I was ready to do something that was deeply impactful. And it made sense to me. It's taken me a while to say that out loud because I don't want it to reflect a lack of humility.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's also fair to be like, I know I'm good at this, and I knew that I would be the right person for this specific job. And this thing that I do now in my career is I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
You did call your mom, though, and admitted in an interview that you were nervous to tell her about the song and your role.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. I mean, I will say in terms of like the career stuff and the platform that I was given, that all felt very natural to me. The idea that I would be talking about being gay in front of thousands, if not millions of people was really scary. That was absolutely terrifying. Before we went out on tour, I made sure I had a will. I was
A will?
sure a
Wait,
will.
why?
Because we were touring and the hatred and opposition on the other side was really scary at times.
What do you mean? What did that look like?
It was a lot more comments than anything online. Responses, like accounts we'd hear from other people, and the Westboro Baptist Church like protested one of our shows.
Really?
And like, yeah, Nasty Dyke, Mary Lambert. I mean, in our little metropolitan areas, it feels like, duh, like gay people have always been here and they deserve, and they walk on the sidewalk too. But it's like, you go 40 minutes outside of that and it's a different world. And I mean, we were touring all across America. And so I knew if we were heading to these other places, like, I don't know what's going to happen. We had heard a lot of feedback that radio stations were getting, threats on the phone, like turn this shit off, whatever it is. And it was like really, so I was scared. And that fear really loosened and lessened as time went on. And especially it was like, oh, I'm not going to experience a hate crime. I'm going to get a Grammy nomination. It was like, okay, everything's
I'll take the Grammy, please.
Yeah.
I think it's, a lot of our audience, this is a podcast dedicated to mental health and substance use disorder. And, the statistics are pretty amazing. I mean, we see that especially not just young adults and kids, but older adults like myself, people who are, LGBTQ are more likely to be depressed or anxious or deal with mental health issues. They are more likely to turn to substances to relieve the pain, ease the discomfort. They're more likely to have suicidal ideation. And you check all three of those boxes as a kid.
Yeah, gold star.
Yeah, gold star. You wrote in one interview that you spent much of your life feeling really weird and uncomfortable with yourself, that you know that people think that there's a predisposition to mental illness, but you think yours is actually born from trauma. How young were you when you were grappling with some of these feelings of being different, being an outsider, being so uncomfortable with yourself? At what age did that start?
I don't remember a time that I didn't feel that way.
Really?
I think, yeah, as soon as I entered school, I think that's when I felt weird. But I was, I experienced sexual abuse from my dad. And I think having that happen really, because it was early, unfortunately, it was like really early childhood stuff. And I think experiencing that lent itself to feelings of discomfort and feeling unclean, feeling like there was something wrong with me pretty early on. And we were also really poor. And so all of a sudden, when you get into school, you're like, oh, you have different shoes that you wear, something, like your shoes don't have holes in them or whatever it is. And you start to compare yourself. So as soon as that comparative thing started happening, that was immediately when I was like, oh, there's something weird about me. And when I first entered grade school, I didn't talk. I was very much dissociating, I think, a lot of the time. I'd created an entirely different world that I lived in. And I was the kid like talking to themselves, I didn't feel connected to reality. And I think, now learning what I have about the unfortunate repercussions to the unfortunate consequences to sexual abuse, and especially early sexual trauma, is that dissociating, is that like, this isn't happening, and I think that's sort of been my go-to coping mechanism. And that's really when it started.
I'm so sorry you went through that. And it's very common for children to blame themselves for when especially parents do something terrible to them, because you just simply can't imagine that this human being on whom you rely and love could do something like that. You said you were in therapy from the time you were 4. Did I read that correctly?
Probably closer to like 5 or 6, but it's
okay,
not a big deal. Yeah, but
still
very
pretty young.
Yeah,
pretty young. Did it help?
I mean, I guess I could never know for sure. But I think what I felt is I want this person to like me. I want to make this person really happy. And but I think because I was so disconnected, it just really didn't help maybe the way that it should have. But who knows? I feel like a very well-adjusted person, and maybe it's because of, how many years, 30 years of therapy.
As you grew up, you turned more and more, you were always into writing poetry, right?
Mm-hmm.
At one point, though, in your teenage years, you were diagnosed as being bipolar, which is rough. That's tough. That's tough to deal with. Mm-hmm. And you said at that point you were turning to alcohol and self-harm to cope with all of that. And tell me what that looked like in your life.
Yeah.
Because that's a common thing. I mean, a lot of people, especially, teenagers, don't want to feel something. So they will turn to a substance or a self-harming behavior that relieves that feeling or masks that feeling.
Totally.
Or numbs that feeling.
I think my personal experience was that the bipolar diagnosis was really, I didn't believe it. I talked to my doctor and then a psychiatrist, and they diagnosed me bipolar. And I have an aunt and uncle that are also bipolar, so it runs in the family. But I had this feeling where I was like, no, I've just experienced a lot of tough stuff, and I'm also in theater, so I'm just really dramatic. And because it felt inconvenient. It felt like just adding another block to the the house of pain. I was like, I don't want another thing. I don't need another thing. I already have so many things. I would rather not deal with that. So I didn't. So I said I didn't want to go on medication. And I also, there was this thing going on at the time, I think, that I felt like a lot of people in my group in high school were getting diagnosed with a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. And so I felt skeptical to, and I was reading headlines about overdiagnosing and, are kids really ADD or are they just kids, And so I felt personally skeptical that, no, I'm just moody. I'm just like super hormonal because I'm a teenager and I'm having mood swings because I don't know how to self-regulate. So that was sort of my being dismissive about it. Drinking and smoking and, what I experienced was less like, it didn't feel like a coping mechanism. It felt like a way to bond with my friends. It felt like a way I felt cool. I felt like I can do what they're doing. And isn't it funny when I'm drunk and you like me more, right? Because I'm so funny. And I felt like I could, I could call somebody and I'd have more confidence. And, and I just, that was sort of the impetus for it. But then it did become its own beast.
How so?
As I got older, it became less about doing something social or doing something that was fun and more just like, I have to do this. It just kind of became a compulsion. Like I have to drink. And it wasn't just like, I have to drink. It's like, I have to get drunk. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to have a drink tonight. It's like, let's get fucked up tonight, And so that's the dependency,
Right.
Yeah.
How much of that factored in to your attempt at suicide, which happened when you were 17? And how serious was the attempt? I mean, was it a cry for help or was it an actual attempt?
Yeah, it was. I would say it's more on the cry for help spectrum. Things got really bad. So I got my bipolar diagnosis when I was in middle school or going into high school. And I'd had this whole history of trauma, my mom's husband, and then different partners continuing to be abusive. I just experienced a whole lot. And I had some serious issues mentally and emotionally, just coping and being okay. And then when I was 16, I was with my friend and we snuck into an army barracks because she was dating a guy that lived on the base and I was gang raped in the army barracks.
Oh my God.
And I really relied on church at that time. So I started going to church a lot more. And then I realized I was queer. And that's around the time that things got really difficult because here's this, what feels like the last thing I have left because I don't, I've been harmed in all of these other ways. I lost one of my bandmates to cancer. And this is all in my senior year of high school. I was in a 90-mile-an-hour car collision. There's so many ways that, like, I shouldn't have survived, but I did. But it felt unbearable. It felt absolutely unbearable. And I was dating a girl for the first time and we were both Christian and we both had pretty intense guilt about being queer. And so we had resolved that we were going to repent every day. Even though we were going to date, we were going to apologize to God because we knew we were actively sinning. And when you're 17 and you're already experiencing, feelings of not fitting in, then to be like, I'm deemed to hell, just the stakes are really high. And she and I, she had more access to alcohol. So I was like drinking a lot with her. And then it became clear that we were not going to end up together. I knew she was going to break up with me. So I was going through all of this pretty much in the span of 6 months. And I just kind of snapped. It would be like the attempt I had was the day after going into Seattle with my friends. And it was one of those like perks of being a wallflower. Like I feel infinite moments, like hands out of the window, looking at the city lights, like just the best time of my life. And I remember feeling like I want to end on this note. I think that if I can, I'm going to treasure this moment, and this is going to be my last day on earth. And I think it's time for me to go, because I know that I can't always have that. I know that's not always going to be the reality. And if this is the peak, if this is what is so like brings me so much joy, then I know the next day there's going to be a come down, and there's so much turmoil in my life that I'm not going to be able to bear it. I can't do it. I can't hold it all. And so I found every pill bottle I could in the house, and I had them all in my hand, and I was ready. And then I had this like, I started taking 1 and 2. And then I was like, I have this nagging feeling that's like, you're supposed to do something here and you have to stay. And, I was angry. I was resentful of that voice because I didn't want to stick it out. It's really hard to stick it out. It hurts. It's difficult. I don't want to suffer anymore. And so I decided to call a friend, and I had resolved, if this friend doesn't make me feel better, then I'll continue. Then I'll do what I'm going to. But someone needs to know that this is what's happening, because nobody knows. I'm not telling anybody, and I'm not like leaving a suicide note or something. I am like, I know I'm being impulsive. If there's one person that's going to, pull me out of this, let me just try to call him. And I talked to her, and it really helped.
You said later, because exactly a year later, you went to music school on a scholarship.
Yes.
And you said that music for me was like survival. It was a form of healing and almost self-therapy.
Yes.
So is that what pulled you out of that hole? Is that what brought you to safety? And if so, how so? Like, how is it that music is so therapeutic and cathartic for you?
I don't know if it's the thing that did it. I think the thing that did it was love, and realizing that there's all kinds of love. And just because I wasn't experiencing romantic love right in that minute, that I was experiencing platonic love, and I was experiencing like the beauty and the love of community and friendship, and that there are other things in the world that I could live for. Music became survival in that it became a way for me to process. Because if I didn't have an outlet to process, I would be holding it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like being able to get it out on paper or with my voice. There's just so much healing and catharsis there, to be able to say exactly what happened to you, and to say out loud, I deserve more, I want more, or I want to feel better. That's powerful. It's not just because I think sometimes people really scoff at affirmations or mantras or things like that, but they are really powerful. So if I can create affirmations through song, and that's what I did. And even if the messages were, maybe not the most positive, if they were songs that were depressing, it was like, I got to massage them out of myself, and it felt like I got to release them. And I also saw the impact that it had on other people when I shared it. And so that felt really motivating to continue.
Do you know off the top of your head, can you either read to me or sing to me some of those things that you wrote that connected with other people, or that helped you massage that out?
Yeah, I think I wrote a song on Heart on My Sleeve called Some of Our Parts.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that that was, you know, healing for people.
How does it go?
We are more than our scars. We are more than the sum of our parts.
We are more than our scars. We are more than the sum of our parts.
Yeah. I think when I started talking publicly about the pain that I had experienced and the trauma that I had gone through, sometimes I felt like I was reducing my entire life to these like trauma points. And I was like, I don't want my whole life to be defined by these things that were incredibly difficult for me. I had to process through them. I had to write them out. And I'm so glad I had an outlet for that. And being able to sing through it and share what that looked like for me in a really vulnerable way. Here is this invitation for other people to share how they feel, what they've experienced, and that it's okay. And that this is really painful and uncomfortable, but it's okay. We have to make it okay, right? Like it already happened. So like I have to get to a place where I have peace with it. And I think music helped me find that peace.
Do you ever, it's very difficult, as you just said, to be so open and so public about things that were so deeply personal and incredibly difficult in your life. Do you ever regret being that open?
No, I don't regret it. I think, when I recorded my single After She Keeps Me Warm, I recorded a song called Secrets. And the first line of Secrets is I have bipolar disorder. And I wanted to do a sort of tongue in cheek, really subversive approach to being really open and what it means to be vulnerable, and that it can actually be really freeing and really fun. But I certainly, like the next day after recording it, I was like, am I really about to tell everyone that I have bipolar disorder, like really publicly? And
right after I just told the entire world that I'm gay really publicly.
Yeah, exactly.
Same Love. Yeah.
But I think Same Love really gave me a template for the kind of artist that I wanted to be, which is what I was already expressing in my art. And it showed me that not only is it really cathartic and helpful for me to be brutally honest about my experiences, but, you can go triple platinum. Here's this template that not only is it great for so many reasons, but it's like also maybe it's my way of navigating this industry, because I don't think that I would be able to do it otherwise. I don't think that I could go on stage and have a persona or say something I didn't totally 100% with confidence believe. And so I needed to talk about heavier issues because it made me feel like my platform and my place in this world had meaning. I like my music to be a kind of utility. I want it to be productive and helpful. And so that's what I think, that's where I share from. It's not necessarily where I write from. I think I've probably written close to like 300 songs that I will, a lot of which I'll never share, because I don't know that some of the really dark things or the really sad things that I write about, I don't believe will be a net positive in the world. I think they're for me personally to heal through something and talk through something. And I get to have that. That never goes away. But I get to be really intentional about what I share and what I promote out into the world. And I feel like when we have conversations about what art deserves to be, made, or, what we platform, I think these are important conversations to have, because the intention is really important, and understanding your impact should be a thoughtful process, should be deliberate, I think it's important.
Well, the song went triple platinum because obviously a lot of people really related to it.
Mm.
Do you hear from fans, given that you're writing about something we know from just statistically, never mind, everybody's own personal experiences, knowing somebody who has struggled with their sexuality at a very young age, knowing somebody who may be bullied for that or ostracized or shunned for that, knowing somebody who's struggling with trauma or depression or anxiety. I'm curious, do you hear from fans after you write these deeply personal songs that are clearly selling because they're clearly connecting?
Oh, I mean, all the time.
What do they say?
Especially right after Same Love, the responses were constant and so heart-wrenching to read, and also felt like, wow, okay, we're doing something that's really helping people. And that's all I've ever wanted to do is like help people. But yeah, I mean, sometimes they're as simple as like, I was able to come out to my parents with this song. I put the song in the car and I got to tell my parents that I am gay, or my dad understands me more because he listened to your song. And then sometimes it was, I had a woman who was a pastor at a church that had been closeted for 20 years. And she was like, I don't want to be closeted anymore. And I'm going to come out to my church, and I'm going to accept that I'm probably going to lose my job and they're not going to let me stay, but I need to live my truth. And I was inspired by your song.
What was your mom's reaction when you called her up and told her about Same Love? Because you told me how nervous you were, that she was, in a church that frowned upon, homosexuality. What was her reaction?
Well, okay, so it's complicated. My mom is queer. My mom is bisexual. And at this point was dating, I'd been with this woman, my stepmom, for 15 years. So it wasn't that she wasn't accepting. And she, at this point, was going to an affirming Episcopal church. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't necessarily that. I was nervous to tell her because I knew she would be scared for my safety. When I came out to her when I was 17, she was like, it's just a phase. You think, like, coming from like someone who's in the, in the LGBTQ community, that she would be a little bit more affirming. But I think she just thought I wanted to be special or something, or have something different about me. And her whole thing was just, I just want you to be safe. Like, just don't hold hands in public, and be, just really keep it to yourself. And so, singing this and writing this song on such a large stage or large platform was the exact opposite of that. So she was worried about my safety. And also at the time, Macklemore he wasn't a household name at that point. He was definitely like Washington State and Seattle famous and had a really good following. But it was before Thrift Shop. So I had to be like, oh, it's this rapper, his name is Macklemore, and, explain his sort of thing. So it took some time.
Was Same Love on the same album as Thrift Shop?
Yes. So Thrift Shop was the first single. They'd released Same Love as a partnership for Referendum 74 in Washington State, which was the marriage equality, state bill that had gone through. Mm-hmm. And, it was exciting because we were legalizing same-sex marriage in Washington State. But I don't think they thought it was going to be a big single. Like, that wasn't the goal. But the real trajectory changed when the music video came out. The music video, I think, contextualized and humanized even further the experience of being queer and feeling othered, and then feeling home and safe, and that we're all human, and we all have hurts, and we deserve, equal treatment. So it was pretty much after Thrift Shop, and then Can't Hold Us, and then Same Love had its own arc.
And when, Macklemore is also very famously sober, has written songs about it. When did you how did you make the decision, turn that corner, and put down what was clearly an unhealthy relationship to alcohol?
It didn't happen until like 2 years ago, if that. Like, I
2 years ago.
It's been like a year and a half.
Wow.
Um,
Congrats.
Thank you. It is, and I still will have edibles, and I have like a healthy relationship with, cannabis. And I don't think that for me drinking was as destructive as maybe it was for other people. I was the kind of person where I could go 6 months without drinking, but the second that I like decided I was going to have a drink, I'm like, yeah, let's get drunk. Like, let's go to town.
Mm-hmm.
I was bartending from when I was 21 to 23 or 24. And those are some fuzzy years of my life. I was getting blackout drunk almost every night. I just wouldn't remember. I wouldn't remember closing down the bar. I wouldn't remember conversations. And to the point where I would panic at like 7 a.m. when I'd wake up and I'd be like, I don't think I shut the bar down. And so I'd run across the street. I worked very close to the bar that I worked at. I'd run over to the bar and I would look around, and I thought somebody came in to clean, but it was me. Like, I did it.
And you had done it all in a blackout.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that kind of scared me, because I'm like, what else am I doing that I don't remember, and that it's scary. It's just scary. And
it's scary because so much can happen to a young woman who's in a blackout. And we see this, almost daily, on college campuses and high schools and cities all over,
Absolutely.
where you're in an extremely vulnerable position.
Yes. And I loved like cocktail culture. Like, I worked at a craft cocktail bar, and I loved, like, it felt artistic. It felt like, like foodies, but people that like fine cocktails. And so I'd always imagined, and I liked wine. I liked it for the taste. I liked things to taste really good, and to, the complexities of all of it. Like, I really enjoyed it, but I didn't know how to not go so far in the other direction. When I toured with Macklemore, that was a sober tour, like, there was really, there wasn't a lot of, the drinking culture wasn't there on that tour. But, we'd go out to the bars afterwards and, have our fun, but the culture really wasn't there to support that. But when I started touring on my solo tours, it was very important to have, liquor, wine in the green room. And it just went pretty hard in the paint, smoking and drinking at that time. I didn't really see an issue with it. I remember having a conversation with a girl I was dating at the time, and I was like, it's not that big of a deal to get blackout drunk. And she was like, it is a big deal to get blackout drunk. Yeah. And I was like, I mean, if it happens a couple times a year, that's not that big of a deal. Because in my head, I'm like, listen, I used to black out like multiple times a week. A couple times a year is not bad. Like, I didn't see it as something being that bad. But now, in retrospect, as a non-drinker, I'm like, yeah, it's not ever good. Like, you should never get to the point where you're getting blackout drunk. That's not, it's not good. And if that happens, then that should be something that you strive to correct.
Well, Mary, it has been such a great honor to talk to you. I'm always struck by something that you said at the 10th anniversary of the National Children's Mental Health Awareness Day, and where you were honored. And you said growing up is difficult for anyone, but for those of us who experience mental disorders or childhood abuse, it can be especially challenging. As an artist living with bipolar disorder, there are days when it is an accomplishment to just get out of bed. The sooner we can be honest about our experiences, the sooner we can focus on our own self-love and self-care. Thank you so much for doing so much through your songs and being so honest, because clearly you're connecting with a lot of people who have struggled with all the same things you've struggled with. And too many of us keep those struggles and trials and challenges hidden deep away, where they fester and grow and eat away at us inside. So thank you for your honesty. It was wonderful to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. This was an honor.
Thanks, Mary. Thank you so much for listening to Heart of the Matter. As a reminder, if you need help with a loved one struggling with substance use, you can text JOIN to 55753 or visit drugfree.org. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website at drugfree.org/podcast. And if you enjoy what you hear, please consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. We'll talk to you soon.